Hello, and welcome to the Constellation Fund's first ever Impact Forum, Strength in Numbers. My name is Andrew DAYTON, and I'm so grateful to each of you for tuning in today to learn a little bit more about the innovative work that we're building here at the Constellation Fund, and most importantly, to hear from two inspiring leaders whose work is creating transformational change across our community in our fight against poverty. If you have any questions, we're going to have some time at the very end for Q&A, so please feel free to plug those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We have several hundred folks who have RSVP today, so we'll do our best to get to them all. But in the meantime, please add any questions that you might have. So since launching Constellation as a pilot just 2 short years ago, we have sought to accomplish a simple goal with a complicated execution: to use the best available information to make the best possible investments in the fight against poverty. And since the very beginning, we've gotten some variation of the same questions. How does it work, and how is it different? Now, fortunately for all of you, today we're joined by a number of wonderful people who are much smarter than me who are going to speak on that topic. So I'm going to be pretty brief in setting the table for their conversation. And if you're like me, and are still digesting your Thanksgiving meal, perhaps setting the table is the right analogy to run with. So take a minute to picture our community's collective table, which, yes, is filled with challenges, but also packed to the edges with opportunity, knowledge, and wisdom about how best to accomplish them. Over here, you've got data from the myriad nonprofits that are working to fight poverty in our community. This nonprofit data is what most of us think of when we think about data-driven or evidence-driven philanthropy, and it's certainly a key ingredient. It can help us understand the activities and the costs associated with all this amazing work. But there's so much more at the table. We have a myriad of different sources of data, from local demographic information, from state, local, county levels, that if skillfully used can help us better understand the intricacies of the lives of those who are experiencing these challenges and who are participating in these programs. We have stacks and stacks of evidence in the form of peer-reviewed research, empirical studies that can help point us not just to the outputs of all this work, but the outcomes that they are creating in the lives of those that we serve. There's the qualitative information, the incredible knowledge from our community, the voices of those who are experiencing poverty and who can help us see the hidden truths behind these challenges. And still there's more. There's the most generous donors in the whole country. We have a collection of the world's most innovative businesses with an unrivaled commitment to this community. We have world-class research and academic institutions and a nonprofit community that is full with breathtaking commitment. Our table is full, and it is brimming with opportunity and knowledge, and it is everything that we need as a community to make marked progress in the fight against poverty in the Twin Cities. But in my opinion, to do so, we need to get, as a community, serious and organized about harnessing the full power of this abundance. A task that, because of the complexity, the deluge of information, is beyond any one of our individual capacities. Because, as the saying goes, none of us is as smart as all of us. And that's exactly why Constellation has embraced the metric-driven approach that you're going to hear a bit more about today. By working with top minds, top thinkers, and all this amazing information, we can harness the best of it, the most relevant, and build and channel that into tailor-made analyses that can help us get closer to understanding true evidence-driven impact. To be frank, this is a step that has been taken in just about every other area of our modern lives. And I believe that it is time for our community to take that necessary step in its fight against poverty. Now, I'm excited to move on to two of our amazing special guests, Carolyn Smallwood, the CEO of Way to Grow, and Otis Zanders, the CEO of Ujamaa Place, two great nonprofits, impactful nonprofits that Constellation is supporting because of the stories and the science behind their work. But first, I have the honor of introducing someone who really paved the way over the course of decades for Constellation's work. Dr. Art Rolnick has a resume way too long to list here. It includes his current role at the University of Minnesota, his previous work at the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, and even the one-time distinction as Minnesotan of the Year by Minnesota Monthly. But for the purposes of today, I will introduce Art Rolnick as really the originator of the use of this type of tool, these modern tools nationally, to understand deeply and project forward the impact that social investments can make, especially when it comes to his passion, his area of expertise, early childhood education, which I know he'll touch on as well. Art, I'm grateful for your time, for all of your work, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for this opportunity to make this presentation. So Andrew asked me to give you a very short course on return on investment, ROI. ROI is, think of it as a tool that helps us make better funding decisions, better investment decisions. What I want to do this morning is first give you sort of the basics of what is the rate of investment, what is this tool, how is it calculated. I'm then going to give you a specific example how we use this tool in assessing early childhood education programs. What are the benefits and the cost? And you're going to see from that exercise, we found a very high return. And I'm going to conclude by saying it's also a great tool to communicate the public and the business community in particular, and the success we've had in communicating with ROI, the results, and how we've advanced the public policy, the funding in this issue. So let me begin again by talking about the tool itself. So think of it this way. You've got an investment. You're a business that has this investment to make. And most businesses use this tool either implicitly or explicitly. And say you're going to build a factory in another country or in several different countries, or you're looking at a new product and you've got all these different types of investments. How do you choose? Well, what businesses tend to do is the first step they take is to compute a rate of investment by looking at the cost of the program, which is usually at the beginning of the cost of the factory or the cost of the new product, and then looking at long-term benefits. And then you calculate the benefits relative to the cost, you get that ratio, and if that ratio is greater than 1, that's a necessary condition. That means that your benefits are greater than costs, so at least it passes that hurdle for an investment. Now, it's a little more complicated than that because investments over time and costs over time are not the same as costs today. So, for example, $1 10 years from now is not worth $1. It's worth less than $1 today, depending on interest rates. So when calculating this benefit cost ratio, you have to discount the benefits, discount the cost, and then you get the benefit cost ratio that most businesses use in making their decisions. Now, it's not good enough just to have one benefit cost ratio. You really need it over all the different investments, and then you'll pick that investment that gives you the highest benefit cost ratio, or the highest, depending, maybe 2 or 3, but clearly that is a way to start. I say it's a way to start. It's not the be all and end all. Often there are intangibles. You've got to take account of risk, et cetera. But ultimately, you can help build that into a benefit cost ratio and come up with the result of how best to invest. We've argued that tool that business is very comfortable using and is very successfully have been using, that we should use it in the public arena because we have lots of different public investments in ending poverty, for example. And the question is, which yields the best investment? So we happen to take it, and this is the second part of my talk. We use this tool to evaluate early childhood education. We had a sense that it was a good investment, but we used a very well-known study known as the Perry Preschool Study that looked at poverty children back in the early 60s, poverty children that had a quality program compared to quality children that didn't have a quality program. These were 3 and 4-year-olds. We had 40 years worth of data. And so we were able to calculate the cost, which were a 2-year program, about $10,000 in today's dollars. And then we looked at the benefits. And the benefits included that these children were less likely to need special ed, were less likely to be retained in the grade, were more likely to be literate by the 6th grade, graduate high school, get a job, pay taxes, stay off welfare, and the crime rate between the two groups goes down 50%. So these are the benefits. I mentioned the cost. We can put dollar values on those benefits. And we did the calculation. We got a 16-to-1 benefit cost ratio. Problem we had is we really didn't have benefit cost ratios on other programs like investing in K through 12, investing in reducing crime directly, or building prisons, or reducing pollution. There's lots of public goods out there. So what we had to do is there's a formula. Given that data, we can actually take that ratio and turn it into a rate of return, an annual rate of return on investment. When we did that, we found an 18% inflation adjusted return, which is quite strong, which is quite high. Just to put it in perspective, post-World War II, the annual return on the stock market is 5.8%. So the bottom line of that calculation using ROI, we argued we had the best public investment, or one of the best public investments you could make in this country, by investing in at-risk children, high quality early childhood education, and beginning as early as you can. So that was the way this tool was used. It was used in this example, and it was easy to communicate. It wasn't hard to explain to the business community, for example, that are looking for ways to improve their community, that this was their best investment. And fortunately, a man by the name of Warren Staley, this is back in 2006, looked at this research, and he put together an organization called the Minnesota Early Learning Foundation. And it brought together some of our outstanding business leaders, including Ken Powell from General Mills, Doug Baker from Ecolab, Charlie Weaver, who heads the business partnership, Mark Banks, who was with Blue Cross Blue Shield at the time. It was a very distinguished group, let me just put it this way. And they ended up raising $20 million to pilot this program. And as Warren Staley said, let's see if we can take the research into reality. And we did with a pilot. It led to a federal grant because of our success with this program, and because our kids were starting school ready. It led to a $45 million grant from Race to the Top. And ultimately, the state, with the help of then Governor Mark Dayton, we now fund this program, which is basically scholarships that we give to our at-risk parents to attend a high-quality program of their choice. We now are up to $70 million a year with this program, with strong support from the business community, which is unique in this country. So the ROI, this rate of return, we have shown is a very useful tool, not just for business, but for public policy, for making investments in effective programs. So that's my short course for you. That's the argument for ROI, for using it. And I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of this event. I think we're going to have some time. And now I'm going to turn it back to Andrew. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Art. Appreciate it. Appreciate all you do. And, you know, as Art said, he really does deserve credit for building this work here in Minnesota. I'm proud that this started in Minnesota and has found its way to other parts of our country. And what Constellation is trying to do and working to do is to bring the type of thinking that Art and his colleagues focused on early childhood education and bring it out into the rest of the realms of poverty alleviation that we know are critical to success. So Constellation has 3 or 4 focus areas: education, including early childhood, housing, jobs, and health. And our goal is to bring this type of analysis, all the best available information, to understand in each of these areas, where can we find the deepest poverty fighting impact based on the best available evidence. And I think it's worth emphasizing what Art said, that this isn't the only tool. Part of our goal is to use all this information, the quantitative, but also the qualitative, the quality of the leadership, fiscal health of the organization. All of this is critical. The needs of the community, what are they saying about what the goals and priorities should be? But with all that together, we make our decisions. And what we're finding is that there are some incredible organizations out here, many of which haven't received the same level of attention as they deserve given the scale of their impact. And I'm excited to point to 2 of these organizations today. I should note that Constellation has now more than 20 grantees, all of whom we deeply believe in, and any of them could have been highlighted here today, but we're grateful to Carolyn and Otis for their willingness to do that. So first, I'll turn it over to Carolyn Smallwood, the CEO of Way to Grow, which is an amazing organization focused on early childhood work, and AMAL, Constellation's impact officer, who leads our education portfolio and conducted the rigorous evaluation of Way to Grow. As you'll see here in a second, scrolling on the side of the screen, these evaluations are detailed. They took 6 months to conduct. There's tons of metrics involved. We are not going to go through all of those metrics. It would take far too long. So we'll focus on one metric, Amal and Carolyn will, and I will turn it over to them to dive into those details.
Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Amal KARIM. I'm an impact officer with the Constellation Fund, and I lead our education grant making. I'm so excited to be joined today by an incredible leader in the Twin Cities community, Executive Director of Way to Grow, Carolyn Smallwood. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. It's such a pleasure to have you join us today as we do a little bit of a deep dive into the work of Way to Grow. Many of the folks on this call will have heard of Way to Grow and know about your work, but Carolyn, for the folks who are hearing about it for the first time, could you give us briefly tell us what is Way to Grow's mission and vision, and how do you and your team work to serve families in the Twin Cities?
Wonderful. First of all, thank you, Andrew and team, for inviting me to participate on the Constellation Fund panel. I'm honored. Way to Grow's vision is that we believe strongly that each child should have an equal opportunity to succeed in school and life. Our program is an intensive home visiting model that provides services in the Minneapolis, Brooklyn Park, and Brooklyn Center area. Way to Grow actually was founded by one of our previous mayors, Don Frazier, and the president and CEO of Honeywell in 1989. The organization was actually started on the premise that more than 50% of our children were not ready for school in the Minneapolis area. So they created an organization that would attempt to eliminate some of those social and economic barriers associated with parents not being able to get their kids ready for school. Last year, we had the opportunity to serve over 1,700 people. And the families we serve are considered underserved and are some of the most isolated families in the Minneapolis area. With our Great by 8 initiative, we provide intensive services to families, starting off with connecting folks to their primary needs, such as food, clothing, housing, and medical. And then we move into an intensive program called Growing Strong Health Education, then early education, where we're dealing with child development, reading, and numeracy, as well as elementary education, where we follow our kids into about 35 Minneapolis public schools and 20 charter schools, where we work on basic education. Now, we couldn't do this work without our hearts and hands of our organization, our family educators. They are the folks that are on the ground providing this intensive services. There's 11 different languages that are spoken in our organization. We deal with a very diverse population. And matter of fact, we're one of the main organizations that deal with a diverse population. But basically, our families are hardworking, work multiple jobs, as well as they're considered on the front lines. As a result of the pandemic, some of our families have experienced some traumatic trauma. However, Way to Grow and other organizations are there for them.
Strong, which is the prenatal education program, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about that program. Could you briefly, and there's some amazing pictures of some of the families that Way to Grow serves as well here. Could you briefly tell us about the prenatal education program in particular? Just how does it help parents navigate some of the barriers that maybe they face during their pregnancies?
Well, one of the first things that we have to do with our prenatal moms is that we have to help them navigate through some of those barriers, as you indicated. And how do we do that? We provide some of those we address some of their basic needs first. If they are homeless, we have to find housing for them. If they need food, medical assistance, we attempt to connect them to those services as soon as possible. To give you an example, as a result of our work, 96% of our newborn babies was born at a healthy birth rate. And that's because of the hard work of our family educators and our parents. So basically, we provide monthly and or bi-monthly educational home visits to our families. And as you know, a lot of our families face a lot of social and economic barriers. With that, though, our job is to stabilize the home. And when we stabilize a home, we move into our prenatal education. Either that work is done in the home or through prenatal groups and classes, where we're emphasizing each stage of pregnancy with a research-based curriculum called Parents as Teachers. So we're looking at
Right.
prenatal care. We're looking at health and nutrition. We're looking at parent and infant attachment and mental health and safety in the home. Those are the areas that we
Yeah.
focus on with our parents.
Thank you. And it's such a wide range of needs and ways that Way to Grow family educators are supporting families. And this slide, I think, really is great because it indicates now also the transition to different modes of delivering those services given the pandemic. As part of our grant making process at Constellation, we work fairly closely with you and your amazing team to try to capture the benefits, to calculate a benefit cost ratio or an ROI of your work. So as Dr. Rolnick mentioned, in order to calculate our ROI, we use at Constellation a number of mathematical and economic models, which we call metrics. And this helps us estimate the benefits from earnings or health improvements to, say, the families at Way to Grow who are participating in GRAM. For Way to Grow, we created and used 7 different metrics to try to capture those benefits. And today, what we're going to just do briefly is do a quick dive into what is one of those metrics and how did we construct it and what does it mean? So one of those metrics, as you mentioned, we're talking about the prenatal education program here, is the reduced likelihood of low birth weight. And that's the metric that I'm going to just do a quick deep dive into. Again, this is one of 7 that we used for Way to Grow's analysis. Next slide, please. Thank you. On this slide, you will see a representation of the metric with all of the components that we used in order to calculate the benefit. And we are looking at the health benefit that comes from having a healthy birth weight or an avoided low weight birth. So all the numbers you see are the values that we're going to plug into the equation to calculate our benefit. There are 2 basic parts to every metric that we consider at Constellation. The first question is, how many participants should we include? Who are we and how many should we include? And B, how much benefit estimate for each of those participants? Slide, please. We're going to dive into each one of these components just now. So Way to Grow worked with us and reported from their own data tracking that they had served 69 expecting mothers in the prenatal education program. So we assumed that there was 1 birth for every one of those expecting mothers. So we didn't just stop there. That's not where we end with the to include. The next question, next slide, please. We might want to ask, how many participants should we count? And in this case, Constellation tries to apply what we call a counterfactual. That is to say, how many of those participants received a service who we might not expect wouldn't access that similar service without Way to Grow. In this case, we use a really conservative estimate. We use 7% of pregnant women in the Twin Cities overall who we predict wouldn't have had access to this type of program. And again, this is a fairly conservative estimate. The second part of the question that we always ask ourselves is, how much benefit do we estimate for each participant? We use existing peer-reviewed research to show and calculated that having a healthy weight at birth versus being underweight at birth results in, on average, 1.1 years of healthy living for that baby. Finally, what is the monetary value of sort of 1 year of healthy life? And there are a number of methods that are out there that people calculate this. At Constellation, we use a standard $50,000 monetary valuation of 1 year of healthy life to help us monetize this improvement in health. By multiplying all of these values together, along with some other calculations, we arrive at our final benefit. In this case, it was $153,643 in health benefits for all 69 babies over the course of their life. I should just note that these values are brought into today's dollars using a method called present discounting, which simply means that we value a benefit in the future as being slightly less than the same benefit today. This benefit, our metric, this was one of many benefits that we calculated for Way to Grow as home visiting and prenatal programs. This was actually one of the smaller benefits. I just want to point out that there were benefits that totaled in the millions of dollars as well that in our analysis. So those are a lot of numbers. There's a lot of thinking behind that. We'd be happy to answer questions about it. But Carolyn, my question for you is, why does this matter? What does all of this mean in the context of the families that you serve?
Excellent question. And, as we know that, low birth rate is a strong predictor of educational and health outcomes. So first off, it matters because the data supports our qualitative work that we measure internally at Way to Grow, such as our monthly educational home visits, ensuring that families go to their prenatal visits, helping families deal with stress and helping them create a stabilized and healthy environment for their children. The data also matters, and it shows that the longitudinal information we experience when Way to Grow see progress and growth in our families, such as we have families that have a healthy birth outcome, their children are successful in school, and a parent completes their education despite many obstacles. The data also matters because it helps us shape solid policies that can make a long-term impact, which is very, very significant at this particular time. Which I think it also matters to me, and this is my personal opinion, is that we know that health, the education and housing and employment disparities, if solved, can provide significant benefits to society. So that's why that data matters.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how our overall benefit cost analysis that we did for Way to Grow alongside Way to Grow, how has it affected how you think about your work, if at all?
Well, Way to Grow has a expansion, 3 to 5 year expansion plan. And we have plans to expand our services possibly beyond Minneapolis, Brooklyn Park, and Brooklyn Center. So the data actually reinforced and validated the fact that our work was impactful, which is giving Way to Grow additional leverage to expand our reach to more possible potential national donors, as well as expanding our reach and serving more families. So we're excited about that. It also pushed us as an organization, to really think about how we review our own internal metrics and how we are currently working with our families. So we thought that was significant. Those are the two key areas that the cost benefit analysis brought to Way to Grow.
Thank you, Carolyn. In the about a minute we have left, are there any folks will have a chance to ask questions as well afterward? Are there any final thoughts that you just would like to wrap up with or share with us before we hand it back over to Andrew?
Sure. Yes. I have to say the Constellation Fund support has given Way to Grow an extra pair of hands to help us lift up our work that is needed in the community by people that have limited resources. There's a lot of organizations that are out there doing some amazing work who needs the opportunity to work with the Constellation Fund. The strategy of investing in what is working and giving organizations the opportunity to build additional capacity by showing their short-term and their long-term benefits that will impact the community is outstanding. It's an outstanding strategy to help us build capacity within our organization, but also to inform potential investors that their dollars are making a difference in our community. So I want to say and give out a big thank you to the Constellation Fund.
Thank you. Our thanks go to you for the work that you and your team and your family educators and the families you serve are having in our community. It's been a pleasure, Carolyn. Thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it over to Andrew for our next conversation, and we'll be back for questions at the end.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Amal. And I'll just echo my thanks for the work that you and your team lead at Way to Grow. It's truly inspiring. I'm going to quickly move it over to our next conversation in hopes of saving some time at the end for some questions. Want to leave plenty of time for what will be a great discussion between Otis Sanders of Ujamaa Place and Rose Carr, Constellation's Managing Impact Officer, who conducted the evaluation. And let's see if the scroll works this time. We've got an example here on the right of how long and detailed the full evaluation of Ujamaa was. It took 6 months. There's way more numbers than we can cover in the next 10, 15 minutes here. So we're going to focus on one metric, and I'm excited to turn it over to Rose and Otis to dive in.
Hi, my name is Rose Carr. I'm the Managing Impact Officer at Constellation, and I'm here today with an incredible leader and a really lovely human, Otis Sanders, who is the CEO of Ujamaa Place. Otis, it's just really an honor to be here with you today, and I'm really excited about our conversation and the opportunity for those turning in to learn about your commitment to and your passion for Ujamaa. But I'd like to start with your life. It's really, from my conversations with you, seems like a beautiful choreography of experiences that brought you to Ujamaa. So I'm wondering if you can share some of your own history and background to start us off.
Well, certainly. Well, good morning, and thank you, Rose. Before I begin, please allow me just again to say how thrilled I am to be invited here today. The many programs that Constellation support to be selected to be highlighted and to be introduced to your panel this morning, just fantastic. So we really appreciate that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say how much I enjoy amazing conversations with you, Kate and Andrew. Some great conversations, and they get emotional at times, but I just can't thank you for that pathway they put on that can guide our guys and our mission and our men. I normally allow Linda Mahoney Day to introduce about my past, but if I may, I think when I talk about my journey, the lead up to now is actually a 50 plus years journey, because I trace my passion for social justice reform, civil rights, human rights, and equity back to growing up in the Deep South under the tutelage of my mother, who was a powerful presence in my life, who taught me so many things about finishing my role, but more than all about how to navigate life. And also that meant looking at the pathway out of poverty was through education, knowing that was the groundwork piece of it. So I consider myself a child of not only of surviving Jim Crow, but of desegregation. I was in the first generation that lived through that process. And through that process was the pathway that led me to Minnesota by going to Gustavus after graduating from high school. And after graduating from Gustavus, I joined the Minnesota Department of Corrections, spent 35 years there. And during that time in corrections, I had a lot of lessons learned by looking at people that had made bad choices in their life, that still had aspiration of being good fathers, good community leaders, and wanted careers, wanted jobs, but they had made a mistake in their lives. And it really did ground me in the idea that, people should not be judged by some of the choices that they make in life when you don't know the option they had to choose from. And I say that because a lot of times people have making bad choices because of their circumstances. Anytime that you navigate the intersection of poverty and racism, you're in a survival mode. And I think all of that training that really did lead up to my time in corrections, as well as leading up to the point now of working for the men of Ujamaa Place.
Those who don't know Ujamaa, I'm wondering if you can provide a brief introduction and talk a little bit about the change that you all are seeking to make in the world.
Absolutely. I think when you see Ujama, you see a place that's designed to prevent the flow into the criminal justice system, as well as a re-entry portal for guys coming out of the criminal justice system. So Ujama is a very unique in position. And since our inception in 2010, our mission is to provide transformational service for young African-American men experiencing inequity at the intersection of race and poverty. And we do that through participation in a trademark theory of transformation, that we use this model to create a sense of brotherhood, stability, as well as personal success. So the Ujama model itself is continuing to be offering what is have is high context coaching and making sure that through the coaching they can find themselves navigating each man through development, through employment, education, wellness, housing, connecting with the family, dealing with hysterical trauma, and eliminate contact with the penal system. Again, this holistic model is designed to address systemic issues that maybe leave people on the outside looking at historic a portion of marginalization. So the model itself is about stabilizing people in order for them to seek personal transformation.
Excellent, thank you. So now let's go a little bit deep and look at some of the metrics that Constellation used to support and analyze Ujama's benefit cost ratio. So we created 7 metrics to analyze all of your programs. But for the purpose of today, we'll be looking at a metric that projects the lifetime earnings of Ujama men as they advance in their educational achievements. So the metric, as you can see on the screen, is high school equivalence leading to lifetime earnings. And this represents how Constellation estimates the additional lifetime earnings Ujama men earn by receiving their GED certificate through Ujama. And this metric also, what's cool about it, it allows for the estimation of benefits from potential future increased chances of enrolling in college or a higher educational degree. So now I'm going to break it down a little bit for you into individual pieces so we can bring it all together. So the first number in the equation comes directly from Ujama as the number who have received their GED through Ujama support. The second number in the equation is called the counterfactual. So this essentially means that if not for Ujama's work, this is the share of men on average who we would expect to receive their GED. So what we do is take the difference between the number who received a GED with Ujama's support and those who would have received their GED without the support to identify the net impact of this work. The remaining numbers represent the per participant increase earnings resulting from receiving a GED. And the average increased earnings from a higher likelihood of going to college, receiving an associate's degree, or receiving a bachelor's degree as a result of having a GED. And then this final over $4 million number is the projected lifetime earning increase for the total of 148 Ujama participants. So the numbers, it's really in the weeds, but at Constellation, while we are about the numbers, we never forget that these numbers represent human lives and the impact from nonprofits on those lives. So Otis, thinking about this metric, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the people behind these numbers. What does this metric look like in action? And what is that human impact?
Absolutely. Here at Ujama, we know that our program saved lives. We know that it saved the state of Minnesota a lot of money on court costs, incarceration costs. We know that we stabilized lives, but through those metrics there, we can see how not only are we stabilizing guys, but we are really transforming lives and putting people in a position to increase their power of wages. The men we serve, and the idea of knowing that this wraparound services that we needed is to through education allows them to get a better opportunity for employment. An opportunity for employment, get them to pay for their housing. It stabilize so you can address some of the family connections, so you can get together with your kids heal old wounds and trauma and everything. So through this analysis, we are seeing people that come to life, and we're seeing people come to life that we can use this information with our men to tell their stories in data. This data is able to tell our funding stream and community that we are successfully training our men for employment. The data is telling the men in the Young Place program, as we generate $4.92 for every dollar invested, is showing us that the power of data, research, and analytics to address the horrific results of poverty. UJAMA is able to statistically prove that our men are becoming employed. So get a chance to look at our everyday operation, is how we design ourselves and how we plan ourselves for the future, what have you. So again, knowing that data can prove a lot of our work is just amazing to have that kind of support that we can not only show to the people that in our family, but the ones that support us as well.
Yes, thank you. Wondering if you could speak to how these metrics have impacted how Ujamaa Place thinks about its work.
It definitely has impacted how we can move forward to do our strategic planning. I think right now we're in the process of going through our strategic planning for the next 3 to 5 years. I think with this will allow us to look at, revisit our past, do a beautiful Sankofa moment, to look back and see where we've been. And as we go forward to plan, should we look at expansion? What vein did we do best? And I think through this kind of numbers, it allows us to know that what's working, what does not work, how to revise it. So when you look in between the numbers, you'll see that how can we provide not only financial support, but the capacity building piece as well. So no doubt it's very much is entrenched how we're thinking today and tomorrow about whether we're expanding or how we can expand the scope of our reach. How can we understand to recruit different funders and supporters to support this work.
Great, thanks, Otis. So one thing that we do after an applicant becomes a grantee is to host a goal setting session. And this is where we collectively determine goals that we want to work on for the year with the grantee. And our goal setting session was very special with Ujamaa. I think part of that is because one thing that Otis and I like to do together is cry about all the good work that's happening. So we had some good tears in this session. And it really led to some exciting work with Kate Generu and our Beyond Dollars program. So I'm wondering, Otis, if you can talk a bit about that process and how you have worked with some of our Beyond Dollars partners to really advance Ujamaa's capacity.
Absolutely. Rose mentioned the emotional piece, and it comes from the point of just being affirmed. When you have an organization that's still in the toddler stages, being 10 years old, and you knowing that as you go through, you're trying to gain identity in our community, respect as well, that it just really affirms what we're doing. And we sit down and talk about projects, and we talk about the goals that you mentioned. And it went beyond the financial support, which I appreciate. It's all about the capacity building. How can we extend your reach locally, nationally? And I think those were the goals that was sent forth to us at that time. And it was a challenge that I fully accept. But we're talking about equipping our men. We talk about the commitment we have to the organization by being introduced to other corporations that are helping us to be better equipped to serve our men. So it's been a lot of tentacles from the goal setting. And as you and Kate has introduced us to other people that extend that reach into those communities, it's just been mind-boggling. And I think that I get emotional because I think about the humble beginning for civic-minded people that was trying to start out having an organization that can improve their community, and to have been given that stewardship to bring it to the point that Constellation, like other funders, have confidence in us in our mission and willing to invest in it. So some beautiful goals have been set. We're in the middle of them, and I'm looking so much forward to this continued relationship.
Excellent. Well, it is a true joy working with everyone at Ujamaa. We have just a little bit of time left. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about Ujamaa's work?
I would like to say, yes, I would like to take the opportunity to talk about not only the data part of it, but also something that's really getting missing about this piece. The men that we serve they come into our midst, and our goal is not necessarily get this population making Wall Street millionaires, what have you. But we're talking about a different set of people that are looking to just to be stabilized, trying to get to the point to take care of themselves and their families. And I think through this metric here that we can talk about how we've been able to keep people out of prison, how we've been able to put dreams on there. And so much of the work that we do, we didn't think that was measurable when you're saving lives, when you're stabilizing lives. But I think the nice little sweet piece when we look at the data showing that not only are we saving lives, we actually transform lives. We're making them better fathers. We put them on a pathway to prosperity. And I think something that we can realize as we are continuing to work, that even that Carolyn Smallwood's program is doing, that we catching them at that point and taking them into manhood, which is we enjoy doing so much.
Thank you, Otis. I think your holistic approach to those you serve really makes a huge difference. So thank you for your willingness to share about yourself and about Ujamaa and for being here today. And we're just so thankful. So Andrew, I'll turn it over to you and we'll do some Q&A.
Awesome. Well, Otis, thank you so much for the work that you're leading and for lending your time today, and to Rose for all the work that went into this evaluation. These evaluations take 6 months and take a lot of effort. And there's actually the first question that points to that process, which is how are metrics created and who creates them? So Rose or Amal, you're more qualified to answer those questions than I am. Perhaps I'll turn it over to Rose, and then Amal can chime in with any additional details.
Yeah, so we were, the Robin Hood Foundation very generously in New York shared a number of their metrics with us. And then Andrew and a team spent a year working with economists from the Federal Reserve, Carlson, Humphrey, the Wilder Foundation, and they localized those metrics. So what we really want is for the research behind it to be hyper-local. And so that's what we did. And then we ended up bringing on an economist from the Wilder Foundation, Jose Diaz, as an economist on our staff. And so he's continually working to improve and build our metrics. I think in the last round, he and Lisa Raw, also on our staff, built around 40 new metrics to align with the programs that we were serving. So what's really excellent is we have a book of metrics that we can go to, but we also can create new metrics that best align with those organizations.
I'll add just that we have an incredible impact council, the Constellation Impact Council, comprised of leading economists from our region, from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, from the University of Minnesota, from Wilder Research, and they also provide an additional lens on the integrity of our metrics. And then we also reach out to folks. You know, we work with partner organizations who are the experts in the fields in which they're working for ideas about research or trends in the research that might exist to help point us in the right direction too.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Sorry, I can't see who these are from, but to all of you who submitted questions, we appreciate it. So next question is for me. What was the investment made in Way to Grow to get the $153,000 in benefit? And so just to add a little bit of clarification there, as I think Amal mentioned, you know, that's just one metric and one benefit stream. There is at least seven metrics that were conducted, all of which on the aggregate added up to well into the tens of millions of dollars of benefits that are being created by the work that Carolyn and her team are leading. And so that was just one sort of snapshot. And then all those benefits are weighed against the program costs to create an ultimate benefit cost ratio, benefit cost analysis. And Constellation does sign confidentiality agreements with each of our organizations because we want this information to be between them. But since Art Rolnick, who is on Carolyn's board, wrote an op-ed in the Star Tribune not so long ago highlighting Way to Grow's over 10-to-1 return on investment, I feel like the cat's out of the bag on that one. So I'm I'm able to share that there's real transformational impact happening there. Constellation's investment was in the low six figures. We're still growing. Our goal is to give bigger and bigger grants, especially to our top grantees. And so that's how we think about the full benefit cost analysis. What you saw here was just a little sliver of all the benefits that Carolyn is creating. Amal and Carolyn, feel free to add anything there if I missed it.
I think
all right,
you
good. Well, the next question's for you, so don't get too comfortable. How did the Constellation Fund, and Amal, this is probably best for you, arrive at the $50,000 value for a well-lived year?
Yeah, and this is a good question, and I think it points to the fact that all of our metrics are based on a set of assumptions, and so depending on what assumptions you're using, some of the ways the math will work out in slightly different ways. I mean, that's just sort of how I think economics works. So the assumption that we used in this situation was $50,000 a year, and that's a relatively standard valuation of 1 year of healthy life. It's not the same as saying what is the value of what is the value of a year of life, like just adding to your life expectancy. It's more about how can we evaluate the value of a year of living healthily. So it's a standard number that we use across the board, and there are other thresholds that are used in health research as well with different dollar amounts. The important thing is that we try to keep that number, we do always keep that number standard across all of our health metrics so that there's no variation, unfair variation.
Yeah, hey, Andrew.
Art, I was going to say you might have some thoughts. You have an advisor on the call. Maybe we can talk to him.
I wanted to jump in because you look at private benefits, and there's a significant amount of public benefits in much of the investments you're making. So I think you're actually way underestimating the total benefits of the programs that you're funding, and maybe that's good in a way that you're conservative. But listeners should know that there's significant public benefits in terms of the schools, for example. When kids enter school healthy and ready to learn, teacher productivity goes way up, teacher turnover goes way down. You benefit lots of other children. You reduce the cost of special ed because fewer of these kids need special ed. So there's significant public benefits to your investment, and you're way understating that. Again, I think it's not a bad idea to do that, but I think people should recognize that it is an underinvestment when you take account of all these, what economists call externalities, these spillover effects to the whole community.
That's right.
And it's one of the many reasons I've been very impressed with the way you've approached this issue.
Well, thank you. And just a little context, the reason that we have chosen to do that, like some of the other organizations working in our field, is that our goal, our mission at Constellation is to focus solely on the investments that create the biggest quality of life benefits in terms of health and wealth improvements, as well as some of the intangible factors that we certainly do look at in our qualitative evaluation for people who are living in poverty in the Twin Cities. And as Art pointed out, that there's other benefits that programs like both of these are creating for our community. The challenge is for an organization that has a very specific goal in mind, which is focusing on the individual benefits to those individuals who are living in poverty, say tax savings often accrue to people like me, which again is something that we should celebrate, something that the work that these and others in our grantees in our portfolio are doing. There are definitely more positive benefits that are being created across the community. Our focus here through Constellation's lens is what is going to have the biggest impact just for the people who are being touched by this program who are living in poverty. I will get a couple minutes left here, so I'm going to keep on going. Rose and Otis, how do you place a dollar value on some of the, quote, softer metrics? For example, 1 year well lived or staying out of prison.
Otis, do you want to start or do you want me to?
I can certainly start. I think one way to do is comparative analysis that we have of looking at the incarceration rate, how much would it cost to keep an individual locked up in one of the state prisons for a year, but also the additional costs that we had to weigh in, the court costs, the jail costs, the whole process of the whole criminal justice system, what have you. And by eliminating all of that contact and you put it into a scenario of what it takes to do the transformation piece is one of the big metrics that we use. They talk about how we get to that conclusion of a per diem being lowered, or that the cost analysis is more beneficial at a person in the community on a pathway.
Mhm.
Thank you. Nothing to add.
All right. Okay,
Andrew,
here's
Andrew,
Yes,
excuse me a
sir.
second. Can I just add one comment? There's
Art,
some
you always
there's
get
a
to
team,
jump in.
there's a team at Yale University that are working with incarcerated dads, and they're mentoring them, and they're showing that they're now becoming fathers, and recidivism goes significantly down. Those are huge public benefits, but there's also this private benefit. So that what the type of work Otis is doing, that they keep the family together longer, that has huge spillover effects to the family and the kids. So I don't think these are such soft numbers. I think these are actually hard numbers. I think these are really strong dollar values and individual values, and I think we need to capture those when we are out there looking to fundraise and making the case that these are really good investments.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, thanks, Art. Rose and Amal, another one for you too. Are there any organizations or programs that don't give a great return on investment? What does that look like? What do you do when you find that? And I'll turn it over to you. I think just to put some context, this is part of the reason why we sign a confidentiality agreement. Is we try to celebrate the organizations that, based on the evidence, are doing the very best work. But our goal is not to shine a light on organizations that don't perform well in the evaluation. There are many ways an organization can meet its own goal without meeting Constellation's focus on improving living standards for people living in poverty. So this is not a scorecard on the quality of an organization's overall work in terms of the mission that it has chosen. But I'll, with that context, turn it over to Amal and Rose to add any thoughts.
Sure,
I can jump in.
start. Oh, you go, Amal. It's you go.
I think one thing to consider for when we're looking at ROI, we've talked a lot about the benefit side. The other half of the equation is cost side. So one consideration for why a great return on investment might not be present is potentially the necessary costs associated with a particular program, really high capital costs or fixed costs that make it just more expensive can sometimes change the ROI, sort of the scale of the ROI. And then I would say, we're learning a lot about organizations, and the learnings that come out of our analyses are things that we're starting to synthesize and pull together. We don't have anything conclusive yet. Again, we've done over 30 evaluations to date, but it's still a small sample size for us to make decisions. I would say sometimes, shorter, really short-term impact programs might have a small Y, because where we see potentially intergenerational impact, especially early in education. I have a bias towards early interventions in education and health can sometimes result in on the higher end versus like shorter term impacts. But again, we're learning a ton.
I would just add that every organization that we do an analysis on receives a copy of that report. So they can use that. It's proprietary to them. It's our promise that we will never share it. And so they can use that to think about their programs differently, or look at specific benefits and use that with other funders. So we've seen other organizations leverage funding by using this report as part of their grant application.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Rose, this is an asset. Part of what I'm most proud of about Constellation is providing this asset to our organizations that receive funding, but also to the organizations that don't receive funding. The work that goes into this is again, 6 months working with top economists, folks with experience on White House councils of economic advisors. I mean, these are analyses that are out of reach financially to just about any organization in the community. And we want to be able to provide that asset to organizations. And part of what I'm excited about is folks like Carolyn, folks like Otis, other grantees are using this information, these analyses, not only to improve their program, but also to leverage that to unlock additional capital from new funders, new donors who see the value, see the impact in new ways. We are out of time. I wish we had more to cover. It's 12 o'clock on the dot. Real quick, if you're interested in learning more about the metrics, we actually have them posted all online, so you can geek out to your heart's content. Careful, you can get lost in that page, but it gives a full picture of how we're starting to build this framework. You'll also be receiving an email tomorrow with a bit more of a visual deep dive into some of the metrics that we covered today. But in closing, thank you so much for your time. Today is Giving Tuesday, and you're going to be getting a lot of requests over the next couple of hours. And my request to you is to lean into the generosity that's needed in this community, but also to hopefully take away some of the learnings from today to think about how we as a community can use all the ingredients on our table to have the biggest possible impact in the fight against poverty. So with that, on behalf of all these wonderful people on the screen with me, thank you, and have a wonderful week and a wonderful holiday ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.